Welcome to Leading Life, the show all about living to the fullest and leading life on your terms.
You will learn tips, tools, and strategies for achieving total personal transformation.
I'm Bren.
And I'm Cam.
This is Leading Life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leading Life, the podcast. We're in the 20s now. We've done 20s of episodes of this podcast, and we got a special one today. But before we get into it at all, just give a quick introduction about how we've been. Cameron, how have you been, man?
Dude, I've been good, but recently, I've been doing like a morning ritual kind of thing, and yesterday I didn't even think about it. I just forgot to have a coffee, right? Because I usually just have a coffee before my workout, and so I got hair in my mouth. Jesus. Cats. I forgot to have a coffee, and I was really tired, and I was just no, it's a Sunday, just probably just because it's a Sunday and my week's over, I'm kind of just probably tired, I don't know. And then today, I was about to reach for my coffee, and I was like, wait a minute, maybe I should look into it. So I started looking into coffee and see, maybe that's why I was tired, and that's exactly why I was tired. I didn't have a coffee. So I wanted to get rid of the dependence of a substance to give me energy. And, I have the hiccups because of it. Apparently the hiccups are a withdrawal symptom to coffee. So during this entire podcast, I'm going to have the hiccups and a headache. And I'm not looking forward to it. But once I get over this, I'm going to have actual lasting energy where I don't have to depend on caffeine. Brennan, I know you've been through this. Tell me about it.
Yeah, because actually I quit caffeine probably... It's been maybe 6 months. I don't know. For me, it wasn't this big event, I'm going to quit drinking coffee, I'm going to quit drinking tea, I'm going to quit caffeine. For me, it was just out of nowhere. It just disappeared in my life. I completely forgot I stopped drinking coffee. And a month had gone by. I was like, whoa, I haven't had coffee in a month. Which is big for me because I was drinking coffee at least 3 times a day. And yeah, you definitely notice a boost because you're no longer dependent on a substance to be, energetic at all. But yeah, my week's been great, man. I've been pumped about this podcast, pumped about all the things happening. There's a lot of cool things happening with life, including this show today. And we got a pretty cool guest. You ready for this, Cam?
Oh yeah, let's dive deep.
Oh yeah. Well, last week we had a Chatham boy, I guess you call him, Chatham boy from California. He had lived in California for 20 years, and then he's lived in California for 20 years, but was born in Chatham. And this week we've got another Chatham person, Chatham boy, I guess we'll call him. But we met this man. We met him at the TEDx in Chatham, Kent. That was recently. I think it was April 20th was the date. I spoke at the event. Cam was there filming. He'll be speaking next year. And Brian was there speaking. So Brian, what's up? How are you, man?
Gentlemen, how are you? It's a pleasure to be here. This is I have to say this is my first official podcast appearance as a speaker and as an author. So I'm pretty excited to be doing this, boys. I got to tell you, you guys are making me look bad with your professional quality microphones. All I got's my damn Skull Candy earphones here, man. You guys are giving me technology envy.
Hey man, you know what? I'm kind of envious of the man cave you got there. So I think it makes it pretty fair. Is that you got a machine behind you? Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's an actual full-size video game with 500 games in it. It was one of my wife's outstanding gifts to nurture my inner child. So
I absolutely love that. That is awesome.
It's funny because my kids will come down and be like, I can't believe you used to play these games with these massive pixels that are, the size of the size of a remote control. They're used to high def, high quality. I'm like, boys, this is what video games were. They used to be blocky and they cost you $0.25 every time you played.
Yeah, totally. That's definitely completely unheard of for the younger generation. I mean, even myself, I grew up when it was those video games were starting, and then we started getting all these cool graphics, and now it's way out of hand. I can't even keep up. But age is just a number.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say I'm old. That's why I played those games when I was in my prime. You guys are way younger than me.
In your prime. Well, I think right now is your prime, Brian, because you're on the Leading Life show.
Thank you. I agree completely.
So, we talked to you a little bit at the TEDx event about you coming onto the podcast, because honestly, your story, the story you shared and the message you shared was really touching. You know, it was not something I personally have heard of too much. I've not heard much about your story and the things that you've been through. And I mean, I could explain it myself, but I'd love to hear it come from you yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get here basically on the
Okay.
show? Starting from, your journey. Let's hear it, the whole thing.
Okay. All right. So I grew up in Bell River, actually. So I'm local to Southwest Ontario. I went to University of Windsor. I grew up in Bell River, actually. I went to University of Windsor. Went to law school at the University of Windsor. So I'm actually a lawyer as well as a police officer. I got hired as a cop in 1999. I was with the Amherstburg Police Service for a bit, and then I flipped over to the OPP, and I've been there since. Um, I've been lucky. I've gotten to do lots of different things in my time as a cop. I've done community policing, media, tactical stuff, legal branch, recruiting, training. I've been really lucky. I've been able to really dabble in a lot of things. Um, how I ended up with you guys today and at the TED Talk is something that happened to me when I was still pretty young on the job. I had 5 years in, and I was it was actually just about 12 years ago, just over 12 years ago. I was the first one on the scene on a very cold and rainy October night in 2004. I was the first one on the scene of a collision between a minivan and a pickup. And when I got there, there was no other emergency services around. There was just headlights and people screaming and broken glass. It was a bad scene. And I ended up making my way over to the minivan, and there was a single guy in the minivan, really badly injured. You know, banged up from rolling around in the collision, and bleeding really badly, like to the point where I knew, oh, this guy's not going to make it. But the part of you that makes you want to be a cop, that's why you wanted to help people. So I dove in, literally into the van, um, started doing what I could for first aid and CPR, and then realized after a couple of minutes that this guy in this van was a buddy of mine, a good buddy from, we had actually met in grade 12 in high school, and took our undergrad together, and we'd been friends, well, at that point for probably 10 years, 12 years, something like that. And spent a lot of time together in university, went to a lot of classes together, cut a lot of classes together. It was all good. And because of the damage and the debris and the blood in the van, I didn't even recognize him. My buddy Mike was his name, Mike Drago. And about a minute after I came to this realization, he died. He died in the van. He had already lost a lot of blood. Like I said, really badly injured. Paramedics got there. They were able to revive him. Or sorry, not revive him. They were able to resuscitate him. He never actually, came back to consciousness. Got him to Victoria Hospital in London, and they took the organs that they could as far as donations, and his family was able to get there and say their goodbyes. It was kind of, it's one of the things that still sort of haunts me about it. His wife was very pregnant, so much so that she gave birth, I think, the day after he died, or 2 days after he died. And I really did nothing for myself when that happened. I just thought, okay, this is a really awful part about policing in the town you grew up in, or the area you grew up in. This is going to happen. And if you're going to be a leader and you're going to be a police officer, that's part of the job. And for a couple of days, I just, sucked it down, had some nightmares, had some bad sleep, coped through alcohol for a little bit. And then after maybe a week, the things went away. The nightmares went away, the flashbacks went away, and I thought that I was good. And the next 8 years unfolded to jump ahead in time here. And I got a couple of promotions during that time. We moved to Northern Ontario. My boys were growing. I have two boys now that are, my oldest son is almost 16, and my younger son is 12. And they're named Jack and Brady. And my wife, Kathy, is a teacher and grew up in a cop's family. So she knew exactly what she was getting into. And she still married me. Um, so anyway, so during those 8 years, things changed. We moved, responsibilities changed, and the whole time I was going down a really long downward spiral. I didn't realize it. I was starting to wall myself off from my family. I was burying myself in work. I would lose my temper over small things. I would fly off the handle. At work, I would act like I was in control, and I knew what was going on. I was cool and calm. And then I got home, and I was sometimes just basically, a monster. I would yell at my kids for small things. Didn't want to take part in the family life at all. Um, and then towards the end, towards the crash that has to come at the end of a downward spiral, I was using alcohol pretty much on a regular basis to self medicate. I'd say I was a functioning alcoholic, or highly functioning alcoholic, I guess. And end of 2011, we were living in Northern Ontario. We moved to Barrie, beautiful brand new house, change in life, back somewhere where you didn't have to drive 2 hours to go to a Walmart. Northern Ontario was great, but it was nice to get a little closer to home. And then one night, during a super serious conversation with my wife about the state of our marriage and the state of our family, I finally crashed. I hit bottom. Like literally, I hit rock bottom. I was done. I was spent, emotionally, physically, mentally, psychologically. Any way you can, any way basically you can be at the end of your rope. I was there, and luckily, though, when you hit that low, the only way to go is back up. And then that was 2012. So coming up on 5 years, everything since then has been coming back up, and that's how we get to where I'm chatting with you guys today. Is the up stuff, the good stuff.
I like the up stuff.
Yeah, the up stuff is way better.
The
So
up stuff is great, totally. But I know exactly what you're talking about when you mentioned, there once you hit that rock bottom, there's no place but up to go. And yeah, I could definitely you relate to some of the feelings of not being able to go anymore, just feeling like that is the end of your rope. Um, Tell us a little bit about what exactly helped you make that shift from okay, I'm at the end, like I don't know where to go, what to do, to where you are today, which is sharing your message and helping other people who have been there.
Sure. Okay. Well, the most immediate thing was that night in January 2012, when my wife, who is a wonderful, tough, strong woman, um, heard this whole story for the first time, because I basically broke down in front of her and listened and just kind of, let me talk, put her arms around me. And then at the end of it all, so by now it's like 2:33 in the morning. We've been talking for hours, and she put it really bluntly, and she said, "Bri, I love you, and I want to stay married to you, but I'm going to give you a simple choice. You either get help or you get out." So, and you know what? That's exactly what I needed, guys. Is something that blunt to put it all on the table, to think, okay, I either change my ways or I'm going to end up single, living in a fridge box on the streets of Barrie somewhere. So I made the decision, okay, I need to get some help. I got to get back to the person I used to be. I found a really good doctor. She was actually a military psychologist, and she saw a lot of first responders in her after hours practice. And it took her about 30 seconds of me telling my story for her to go, yeah, you're dealing with trauma. Can I drop a? I don't know what are the ground rules for language, boys, on your on the podcast here. I don't know.
There are no
Freedom of
rules,
All
Brian.
right,
speech.
okay, all right, okay. So again, she was super blunt with me, and she said, "Brian, you're fucked up." And I said, "Oh, okay. Is that like a medical term?" Like, kind of. She caught me by surprise, and I feel like, and she laughed and said, "Listen, here's why I'd say that, because I need you to understand in very simple terms. I could give you a long clinical definition of trauma, but that it wouldn't be of any help to you right now. You need simple, basically black and white things, and that's as black and white as that can be. Is you're fucked up. We can fix it, but notice I said we. She said, I'm not going to drag you through therapy. I'm not going to drag you through recovery and through your treatment. If you make a decision right here, right now, tonight, sitting here in my office, that you're willing to fight and you want to get back to the man you were, the dad you were, the cop you were, we can make it happen. I have lots of tools I can teach you. I have lots of things we can do, but it's on you. I'm not going to carry you through this process. And if you're not willing to fight with me, then no harm, no foul. I'd be happy to give you a list of my peers in Barrie, and there's the door. And then she's kind of leaned back. So she laid it out really clean for me that this was going to be work. It was going to be hard, and there was going to be um, sacrifices and things needed. And guys, I remember actually sitting there. Not, when I look back now, it seems so odd. I remember actually sitting there and going, do I really want to do this? Do I have the energy to fight? Do I have the will to do this? Or is it just going to be easier to carry on the way I am? And then I sat for probably 2 or 3 minutes, and she didn't say anything the whole time. She just stared at me or watched me. And I finally said, "Yeah, okay, doc, I need to fight. I need to get back to who I was." And she said, "Okay, let's start." And started out seeing her once a week, twice a week at first. Then that led later to once a week, and then a couple times a month, and then eventually, now I call it a tune-up. I go see her maybe 2 or 3 times a year. If things are really bad, I can pick up the phone or jump on Skype and have a Skype date with her. But she was excellent. And now when I talk to first responder groups or military groups or anybody dealing with trauma, the first thing, or I try and get across to them, the first thing is you once you make the admission that you need help, build on that. And there's no shame in admitting that you can't do this on your own. Because without her to and it wasn't that she did a lot of clinical, medical, psychological things. She just helped me lay things out in such a simple, easy to read fashion, which is again what I needed. I needed stuff in black and white, right? I didn't want complex thoughts. I didn't want um, scientific or medical jargon. I just wanted things laid out simply. Um, and I had a lot of growing to do and a lot of rebuilding to do. I had to rebuild things with my kids, my wife, at work, my professional reputation as a police officer, um, uh, people's confidence in me as a police officer. So the first year or so was pretty rough. There was a lot of ups and downs, and there was times when my wife would have been completely justified in kicking my ass out. Um, and just basically saying, I'm done with your nonsense, I'm done with you. She didn't. Again, that's a testament to her as a person. um but yeah, the first year was tough. I had to make a lot of hard decisions about uh what behaviors were I going to leave behind and what was I going to and ultimately things started to kind of fall away one by one, the negative patterns, the negative things, and I was able to just start building up the really good stuff again. um, and she between her and close peers or close people I trusted and my family, they were able to show me that, what, well, like I said in the Facebook message, Bren, down and out isn't dead, right? as long as you're breathing, as long as you are still can draw some breath and are willing to claw and fight back up, you're not out of the game. And you know, it does having PTSD suck? Yeah, absolutely. Has it impacted my life? Sure, but it hasn't killed me. It hasn't crippled me. I'm still a cop. I'm a better dad now than I was. I'm a better husband than I was. Um, but there was times when I went, man, is it worth this pain and this struggle? And ultimately, it was. But at the time, when all you're, you know, when you're in the middle of the storm, that's all you can see. Sometimes you wonder if you made the right decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
Eh,
I'm super congrats on going for that help when you knew you needed it. Um, I guess what we're trying to get out of this episode and why we invited you on the show was I was really moved by your story at the TEDx talk. Um, and there were some things you shared in that talk that really resonated with me because, I guess, in my story, you heard my story. I also, you know, felt I had a lot of emotion, a lot of baggage. I felt like I broke down and hit my personal rock bottom. And I truly believe that you don't change, you don't make big decisions or grow in big spurts until you hit that rock bottom. And it's really that drive that will push you. So what kind of suggestions would you have for somebody who is dealing with some sort of trauma, PTSD, um, you know, emotional baggage, whatever it is? What would you have to say?
sure. Okay. Um, I guess one thing I should add too is that during that sort of dark time I talked about the end of 2011, um, I had some thoughts of suicide in there too. Um, I remember a couple times thinking, man, this is this blackness. I can't take it. Uh, I felt so alone. I felt like nobody got it, and it would have been way easier just to you know, like literally pull the trigger. Um, and what stopped me was the thought of somebody I worked with having to explain to Kathy and my kids that I wasn't coming home and why, and them having to live with the thought of, you know, was there something we could do? Could we have changed something? Um, I so when people say that they've hit a point where they're contemplating suicide, I get that. I absolutely understand that. I can see how you get to that point when all you're seeing is black in front of you. Um, Now to flip to something a little more positive, as far as suggestions, for a lot of people, the biggest step is saying those words, I need help. I can't do this. And as soon as I did that, it was like a weight off, like, I hate to use the cliche, but it was like a weight off my shoulders. Because once you make that first admission, it's out there, and then everything else is just building on that. So if you can get to the point where you're admitting you need help, like I said earlier, build on it. And there's no once you've already said you need help, there's nothing wrong. You're not going to go any further back by saying, not only is something wrong, but I can't do this on my own. So that's when you need to start to look at your resources. Um, so so with mental health things, you know, do you need a professional? I would say yes. A psychologist, a counselor, a therapist, you know, somebody who can start to guide you through the process of your recovery and of your journey back from wherever you are. One of the biggest things I say to to first responder groups when I talk to them is your family can be your biggest resource. And I will always regret the fact that I didn't tap into that more. In fact, not only did I not tap into them, I pushed them away. Like I said, I bubbled myself off. I walled myself off from my wife and my kids. They should have been the ones who saw the changes in me first and who went, hey, you know, Bri, dad, whatever, something's not right. This isn't you. But because I created all that space, all that distance, that perspective was gone. So I was really kind of stumbling through the dark on my own. Um, just talking about it, getting it out in the open. Um, there's still such a huge stigma with psychological health and psychological injuries. I know, and once you put somebody in uniform, it gets even worse, right? Police officers, firefighters, paramedics, our job is to help, right? We're not the ones who get the help. Our job is to save everybody else. Well, sometimes the hero needs saving, or the savior needs saving, right? Once you can make that admission, like I said, just build on it, man. Reach out. People are going to help. Some people will never get it. And again, I'm talking about like in the, let's say, the policing world. I know, and I'm very open about my trauma and my story. I've told it lots of times. Officers come to me and ask me for pointers or guidance, whatever. But I still know that there's people I work with who know, and they've cut me loose, right? I'm damaged. I'm a broken toy. I'm however, whatever the phrase is. And a couple of times I was told, you know what, that was being so open about it's a huge mistake, Brian. It's going to damage your career. You're never going to go up the ladder. And my answer to that is, well, if being honest and talking about this thing that is damaging so many people's in uniforms lives, if that's what's going to keep me from going up the ladder, then fuck, keep me here where I am, right? I'd rather be here and be able to do some good and get across to people than be up here and pretend and put the blinders on and pretend that nothing's wrong, you know? Um, so yeah, those were the big things for me, is, like I said, family, just opening up and remembering that it's not the end. Like I said, at the time, I was just felt like I was in the tornado. I couldn't see any further than, in front of my face. But like I said, down and out, it's not dead. And there's always room to, like you said, Brent, once you hit that rock bottom, there's always room to bounce back up. And not only that, but there's this really cool concept that it's gaining more acceptance. It's called post-traumatic growth. And the theory there is that if you can get through your trauma, if you can get back to basically a place where, you're level, you're not too high, you're not too low, that you come through it a better and stronger version of yourself. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that because, like in my case, being able to say that I grew as a person, even, for the last 5 years, and sometimes we're just horrible, really shitty, dark times. But I mean, now I look where I am compared to 5 years ago. I have a platform to speak to other people in uniform about this. I was able to publish a book. I get to do cool things like this podcast with you guys. I get asked to do media spots now about trauma and PTSD in the first responder world. That's all growth, man. Mm-hmm. And that all started with that simple admission that I need help, and making that, like I said, making that conscious, making that conscious decision to fight. And it makes me so sad, I guess is the word, to see other people in uniform or other people in general struggling with their mental health issues, and maybe they've got no support or they've got no one they can tap into. And it just, they've given up. And again, I get that, man. I was close to that a couple of times, but sometimes you just want to take them and go, man, it's not the end. There's always hope. Like I said, as long as you're drawing breath, there's always hope. And again, there's times I mean, by all rights, I should be homeless and single and not seeing my kids, living on the streets of Northern Ontario somewhere. But I'm not, man. Here I am, and like I said, now I've got this platform, and I thank God every day that I made it through, and I've got this new direction that I can take this in.
I really like that term you said earlier, the post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth. It's it really is a beautiful term because it's about turning some of the most horrifying experience into the most amazing experiences of
Yep.
growth and of transformation and of helping others, right? Because you might not be where you are today helping the people you were helping today if you didn't have that experience, right?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so when people talk about, like you said, hitting rock bottom, or not being able to see anything aside from the blackness, I get that. And it's nice to be able to say, listen, I 5 years ago I was where you are. I understand how shitty it
Mhm.
is. But listen, don't give up. Like, you can, if you, and again, it goes back to my doctor saying to me, are you going to fight? And making that choice to fight and want to be back to the person I was. Um, so if going through all that means that, yeah, I did some growing as a person and as a man, as a cop, as a husband, as a dad, then yeah, it was worth it. Um, the concept of the post traumatic growth, it's not accepted by every mental health professional. Some of them think it's, oh, it's just an easy way to make people feel good about themselves. But I don't buy that. I honestly believe that you go through these experiences in life for a reason. And I don't know, maybe there was always a book sitting there in me waiting to get out, and it would have come out eventually another way. But, or maybe there was always, this voice that wanted to do public speaking in me that would have come out another way. But it came out through this 12 years or 11 years of living with these memories, and finally, hitting that point where I crashed, and that was what finally gave voice to what I'm doing now. So yeah, I absolutely believe in the concept of the growth, because in my mind I lived it, and that's what gets me now. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what keeps me fired up during the day, and
Mhm.
and that's what gives me the gratitudes I think about at night.
I love it. I think another great point I wanted to mention, and kind of like poke out of your story there was, you mentioned how you made a decision, and that word decision is so powerful in my life and in my personal experience. And I'd love to share that with others. It's like it all starts with the decision. Like you had to make the decision that you were gonna seek help. You had to make the
Hmm.
decision that you were gonna fight. Right? So many people they talk about change or growth or whatever, and they think of this long process when really it is a long process, but it all starts with a decision, and you can start that decision today. And I love that, Brian. Anyways, we got some comments from some of our life leaders or our lifers or whatever we call you guys. So Sandra says this is such a universal message. Sandra, I'd have to agree. Bear says this is a great conversation. Brian, you are definitely helping a lot of people. That's
Oh,
awesome.
thank you,
And
man.
we actually got a question here from Amanda. Amanda asks, how do you identify trauma when it isn't a specific event? So that's a good question. So for you, it was a specific event that kind of, but also you talked about how it wasn't until later down the line that you actually hit that rock bottom.
Yep.
So tell us
Yep.
how, let's read the question one more time. How do you identify trauma when it isn't a specific event?
Okay. Well, there's actually a concept called cumulative trauma, which means that, so in my case, it was my buddy Mike's death. And I'll use the analogy my doctor used because it explained it really simply. She was really good at that. So imagine yourself as a nail, and Mike's death was a couple of sharp whacks with the hammer that set that nail into the wood. And then in my case, being a police officer, we get exposed to lots of shitty stuff, right? So she said every time you went to another collision or a kid's death or, another stressful or critical incident, the nail went in a little further, a little further, a little further. And she said eventually what happens is the nail's either so set into the wood that it's lodged in there and it won't come out, or it bends. And she said, depending on how you cope with the stressors, is how you determine what your nail is going to do. For a lot of people, though, there isn't one triggering event. It's built up over time. So let's say in my case that I hadn't watched my buddy die in front of me, basically have him die in my arms. there's a very good chance that I still would have developed some degree of trauma because of the cumulative effects of, building up. Most mental health professionals who work with law enforcement, they estimate that about 3/4 of police officers or people who work in the law enforcement world have some degree of post-traumatic stress, from minor and it's the occasional twinge to like full blown, and it takes you right out of the game. um, there are some commonalities with trauma, whether it's critical incident or whether it's built up. um, recurring memories of the events, whether it's flashbacks, nightmares, dreams, visions, sometimes super realistic, where taste, sight, smell, you're right back in the situation where you were. Um, Impacted sleep is a really common one. Overly emotional, like super emotional, like way more than you would normally be. The feeling of sort of being on edge all the time or being wary. Like in my case, it's been 5 years since I started treatment, and I still don't I still don't like things like my boys standing behind me, and I know they don't mean any harm, and they're just reading whatever I'm reading, or they're watching me play whatever it is I'm playing. But I just have to say, hey, buddy, like you're kind of making me antsy. Loud noises will still make me jump. So even 5 years in, there's still things that are impacting me. Um, I'm trying to think of some of the other commonalities. Like physically and psychologically, they present exactly the same way. It's just the one is one you're able to trace it back to a specific incident. So for me, again, Mike's death, as opposed to it's just built up over months or years or whatever the case may be. The biggest common factor is if these things that are disrupting your life, so the bad sleep, the nightmares, the losing track of time, the feeling antsy, the feeling like something, is like, they call it a feeling of impending doom. Basically, you wake up going, oh my God, what's going to happen to me today? If you're having those symptoms, for the benchmark is 30 days. If these things are impacting your life for 30 days, you're going from the realm of normal stress and normal, reactions after a critical incident into post-traumatic stress, because now it's starting to take hold. It's starting to mold your behaviors. It's starting to mold your responses to things. And once you hit that 30-day mark, that's where most mental health professionals say, okay, you've probably gone past the point where you can work on this on your own. Let's get you doing some healing, or let's start you with some therapy. There's tons and tons of really good literature out there. There's lots of great stuff online. If people are wondering, do I have trauma? Am I traumatized? If any of the things I talked about are kind of tripping off we call it in policing, we call it your spidey sense. Do you remember the old Spider-Man cartoon when he had the little lightning bolts because he felt something was happening?
Oh yeah.
If any of those things are tripping off your spidey senses, trust yourself, trust your body, trust your mind, and start looking into it. Like, don't ignore things for 8 years like I did until you have that crash. If you can get on top of these things and, weeks or months after you first suspect, you're going to be way better off. The number one factor in how much PTSD impacts you is how quickly you start receiving help for whatever the issue is. So professional help. So the quicker you can do a debriefing or get in front of a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist, the less impact it's ultimately going to have on your life. So if people out there are thinking, oh, some of these things are ringing a bell, and you can start to tie it back to either a whole bunch of shitty events or one really, really big one, trust your instincts and start maybe considering that you've got some issues with trauma that you need to look at. Like I said, tons of great literature out there, tons of great stuff online. Whether you're a civilian, a victim of crime, first responder, military, there's lots of information out there for whatever your particular case may be. And like I said, trust your gut. If you think something is wrong and you feel that you're not the same person you used to be, then trust your gut and do some self-care.
I like that a lot. And Amanda's in the comments, and she says, yes, this totally makes sense. Yes. So I think that definitely answers your question. We got time for about one more question. This is a question from our friend Danish. And he says, is there a way you can trace what caused trauma, like backtrack to the root, the source of PTSD?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it's really simple. Like in my case, as soon as I started telling my story, right away my doctor's like, "Yep, bam," pinpointed it to that night. For other people, it might be a little more. It might be a little tougher. You might have to dig a little more, and in some cases, it might be very painful. I've talked to lots of. When I wrote the book, I interviewed a couple hundred different first responders and people dealing with trauma. Some of them had very really stirring stories of going back years and sort of discovering either through their memories or through talking to parents or whatever that they were abused as a child or they were sexually assaulted as a child or a teenager and they've repressed a lot of it. So generally, yeah, you can trace the root back to its cause, but you have to be ready to deal with what that cause might be, right? Sometimes it might be something you completely never expected. So like in my case, as part of my therapy with my doctor, I thought, okay, we're here to talk about trauma. But no, we would take little side trips off into talking about, stuff that happened when I was a kid or my relationship with Kathy or stuff with it sounds again so cliche, but stuff with my parents. But really it all forms part of the package that the trauma is impacting. So yeah, most people are able to trace it back to either a specific incident or a set of specific incidents that starts. And some people, much to their shock, are my age, the early 40s, mid 40s, or older, and they suddenly find out that they've been carrying trauma around from something that happened to them when they were 2 or 3. I remember real quick, one police officer I spoke with down in, I believe he was in Texas, and he was involved in a couple of shootings and realized that things weren't right, and he went and saw a psychologist and started to trace things back, and he had a memory from when he was 2 or 3 of watching a playmate drown, and he basically buried it away, and his doctor said, look, you've been carrying this around now for 40 years with you. The shooting stuff was just the icing on the cake. Like, there's other deeper things we need to look at. So he thought, he didn't even remember. So, but for 40 years, he's been carrying this load of guilt around and this load of trauma around. So yeah, you can trace it back. But again, like I said, and this is where working with a therapist or a professional is so important. Not only will they help you get back to the cause, but they'll help you they'll give you the toolbox you need and the toolkit you need to deal with it, because sometimes the answer you get is not super pleasant.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. You'd want to be there with somebody who can direct you in a positive direction, because you never know if you're just sitting there and you're trying to bring all this stuff up on your own. You might not know how to deal with it yourself. It's trauma. So we don't all know how to deal with trauma. And so having a professional there, a friend, someone to listen to, I would definitely seek help and definitely, I love our talk today. I think that you've helped a lot of people. I think a lot of people in a lot of our listeners, a lot of people in the comments got a lot of value from this episode. So thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Awesome. One quick thing, if I can.
Yes.
If anybody is interested in getting a copy of the book, it's called On the Other Side of Broken, One Cop's Battle with the Demons of PTSD. You can Google the title, or if you go to a site called lulu.com, LULU.com, and just type in my name into the search box. I self-publish it, so that's the publishing platform. but it's also on like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and iTunes. So I wrote it aimed at thank you, sir. I wrote it. I wrote it aimed at first responders, but it's also super. There's super general information on there on trauma, on PTSD, and in fact, if anybody is wondering how this impacts the family or how to deal with that aspect of it, my wife, Kathy, actually co-wrote. She authored a chapter that's in there that's all about the effect trauma has on your spouse, your family, your kids, and has a lot of good tips in there for when you're the caretaker. When she's looking after me, what did she do to take care of herself? Because not only did she have my baggage to deal with, she was also raising 2 kids, and she also had to take care of herself, because if she crashed, then she knew she was no good to the family. So, and I'm actually working on a second version of it right now that is aimed at people in the law field. So lawyers, crown attorneys, people who serve on juries, because that's a whole other untapped area where there's a ton of trauma, and there you have no resources. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at right now. But yeah, anybody who'd like a copy of it, the more information we get out there, the more we drag this out of the shadows, the better. And guys, thank you so much for tackling this today. I know it's in some circles it's still kind of a taboo thing, but it's been a pleasure getting to get on here with you guys, and like I said, cast some light on this.
Hey, totally. We appreciate having you on the show. Like I said, there's a lot of people in our comments, and a lot of our listeners got value from this. That's what's important. Sharing a positive message is going to add value to people. And I know a lot of this, might have seen more on the serious side, but there's so much here to think about. We all have, we could all use that help, and just having the ability to go and seek help in those important moments is important. And I think, we've affected some people today. So thank you, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
All right, Cam, roll the outro.
1 second.
1 second, we're working on it.
And we're rolling the outro.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Lead in Life. Make sure you go check out the podcast on iTunes. Leave a review. That'll help the show get out to more people. Help share Brian's message. Help share our message, and all the other awesome messages from all the different speakers we've had on our show. Yeah, Cameron, your turn.
What he said. No, it's actually really important if you guys could go to iTunes and leave a review, and actually let us know what you think about the show in the review. I'm pretty sure you can type a little paragraph. That would be awesome, because we want to know what we're doing right. We want to know what we can do better, and we want to make this show an amazing experience for everybody. So
thanks for your comments. Thanks for listening. Thanks for Brian. Peace.
Thanks, boys.